Most of the time when you're doing disruption, you're changing the business model. You're changing the value proposition, you're changing the monetization, you're changing the products, you're changing the experience. So it's not kind of like a linear change. It's not a transformative change. It's actually something that is a detached from what has been created to actually build something that might be completely different.
So what if the secret to business transformation isn't more technology, but better design? Today's guest believes disruption should be intentional, not accidental. And if you've ever wondered how to move beyond buzzwords and make transformation practical, this conversation will give you the blueprint to achieve this. So today I'm joined by Juan Jose de la Torre, or JJ. Today we're going to dive into the launch of JJ's new book, Transformation Designed, and it's an award-winning guide for leaders who want to turn strategy into impact. You'll hear how design-led thinking reshapes growth and why his approach at Raven accelerates business results. And also we're going to find out what global business communities are saying about the future of transformation. JJ, he's a world leader in digital business disruption and transformation, and is recognized as one of the top digital transformation leaders globally. He's the CEO of Raven, which is a boutique consulting firm focused on business design, experience, growth, technology, and he's been advising organizations in more than 20 countries, founded and exited 3 startups, invested in 14 ventures, and mentored over 150 companies. Certainly well equipped to talk to us on our topic today. His new book, Transformation Designed, recently won a Silver Award at the Non-Fiction Book Awards and is fast becoming a go-to resource for decision makers navigating change. He's a regular speaker at international events, sharing his insights on entrepreneurship and strategic impact design. And we're delighted to have him with us today to help us bring some clarity to this subject. So looking for clarity, JJ, welcome to the Business Behind Your Business.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. Pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Look, I'm really excited because there's a lot of confusion around this topic. And I think that confusion comes from the idea, I guess, from the cause that we don't fully understand what we're actually talking about when we mean transformation. There's been that buzzword come out of disruption and digital disruption. But when we're talking about transformation, what do we actually mean?
Well, it's a great question for a start because, I was at 100% of my clients or prospect clients confuse these words. And if we put it in simple terms, when we talk about digitalisation, it means that you have a process, an existing process that you're doing as a company, let's say opening a bank account, and then you're using technology to make it more efficient. So rather than you filling a form, now you have a PDF, you fill the PDF, you send it by email, and then someone will print it and basically get it again digital, and the process will fall. And this is what happens in most of the companies when they digitalize. Like they take a process and they incorporate technology in 1, 2, or 3 parts of that process, or sometimes in the entire process. But effectively, the process is still the same. Then we have transformation. That is like, I always like to use the analogy of a transformer, like the little toy that the kids have. With the transformer, you can always think about kind of like a robot that transforms into a Cadillac. You have the Cadillac and then you have the robot standing up next to you, and basically you are able to see the different parts that belongs to that car. So some way you're able to trace the origin of what has been transformed. It's not something new. Most of the time has not added anything, but thing has been evolved from that original process that you have. And transformation is complex because transformation requires people to believe that you're going to become from a Cadillac to a robot. That has nothing to do to what you're trying to do as a car or as a robot. As a matter of definition, it's something that you can trace the origins and you're evolving, but that evolution has certain limits and constraints that are the limits or constraint of the original design, in this car, a car. And then you have disruption. Disruption of the word means that you're able to cut the ties with the original design. You're rethinking completely the process. You're rethinking completely if the process has to exist. You're rethinking if you need to fill a form or not. You're rethinking what data are you going to use and how you're going to use it. So most of the time when you generate disruption, has nothing to do with the original intent or with the original value proposition or with the original process that you were using. And this is why it's so impactful. And this is why we see startups that are growing and basically are becoming unicorns, are becoming kind of global organizations that are using disruptions are their way to actually reach the market and create something new.
So we've got different concepts, really. Disruption completely changing from where you are to where you're going to go, a completely new way of thinking. But transformation is taking what you have and creating a better process or a better outcome. Would that be a fair summary?
That would be a fair assessment. I will also add that most of the time when you're doing disruption, you're changing the business model. You're changing the value proposition, you're changing the monetization, you're changing the products, you're changing the experience. So it's not kind of like a linear change. It's not a transformative change. It's actually something that is detached from what has been created to actually build something that might be completely different. And we can use some examples to illustrate. We can use maybe Uber or Cabify or one of these. If we think about digitalization, it's the taxi that is moving around that suddenly now they can give you an electronic receipt, or they can create an app that basically you can see where the taxi is, etc. And when we see transformation, it's a little bit more improvement. So now the cars have, navigation. Now the cars are giving you more information. Now the cars basically are giving or trying to solve more of the frictions that you're having. And when we're talking about disruption, we're talking about a complete new value proposition. Now it's not about you waiting for a car to pass by. It's you actually calling the car to come. Now it's not actually to you getting into a car and then trying to figure out how much it's going to cost, your trip. Now you know exactly how much it's going to cost you and how much time it's going to take you to go from A to B. Now it's not about you calling to a call center if you have a complaint and basically expecting to see what's happened. Now you're actually able to give a rank and give basically kind of like stars or evaluate, your driver and your experience and interact in real time if anything happens to you. So when digitalization and transformation lies mainly with reducing frictions that the customer has when he's consuming a value proposition, disruption is about removing the frictions completely by reinventing completely the value proposition. So instead of focusing on getting more cars, so you can stand on the street and basically have a taxi that will pass by, I basically change completely the value proposition to actually giving you something that will allow you to actually request a taxi or request, in this case, an Uber to come to your position.
So very different, needs and approaches there. So there's a lot of focus, on disruption, but where a lot of business owners are at is that they've got a particular way of doing it, but they need to, change or transform the process and the outcome to achieve better results with what they've got. Obviously, there's a huge need for that because you're engaged to advise businesses worldwide on this whole process, this concept, and you put all of that knowledge into the book, Transformation Design. What was the reason that you actually decided that it needed to be a book, that we needed that guidance, that framework? Because it sounds to me like it is a worldwide problem.
It is. Well, the problem is now as Raven, we do disruption. We don't do transformation, we do disruption. But it's very difficult to engage in a conversation of disruption if you have not been able to do transformation successfully. And around 80% of the projects are related with transformation and digital transformation fail. And this is a fact, and depending on the country and depending on the industry, that 80% will go up to 88, 89, even 90% sometimes. So that means that 9 out of 10 initiatives related with digital transformation would be a complete failure. Thus, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars completely wasted by companies. And we're also dealing with the fact that companies continue investing in technology, continue investing in IT, in adding more things without being able to deliver a better experience to their clients, to their customers, and therefore uplift, the revenues or even kind of retain the revenue. So it's a global problem. And we cannot tackle disruption without actually coping and adopting transformation. And we thought that it was required that we put something out there that is able to actually guide companies on what is disruption, what is transformation, what is digitalization, and what are the key components that you need to consider if you want to do something that is related with transformation successfully. It's not the case of digitalization. Digitalization is super easy, like everyone would get it right because you have a process, you have technology, and you will make it more efficient, period. The problem there is the more technology that you add, more efficient is going to be until a point that is going to rebound, and it's going to start being less efficient, is going to start basically impacting the customer experience. And, the benefits that you were seeing, basically you will stop actually capturing those. So then the company said, well, now it's time that I do transformation. But then as transformation is not well designed or not designed at all, as transformation is mainly driven from a perspective of technology and not from value proposition, that is what actually we're putting out there to be consumed, those transformations would fail.
So 80% is a lot. That's a really high figure for failure. And I just think of the resources that are consumed in those projects that don't succeed. I also see that when the project doesn't succeed, the management buy-in or the team buy-in to actually get stuck into the next phase or the next attempt at transformation is not as exciting. They're sort of thinking, oh, we failed last time, let's not go through this process again. But I guess you were talking about transformation and technology. One of my observations is that people will grab a piece of technology and try and fit it to their current process without adapting the process to take advantage of the technology. Is that something that you've also observed?
Totally. We see this type of things across the entire business and across the entire value chain. For instance, let's take, customer relations. We see companies that basically deploy CRMs when they have very, very basic kind of operations in terms of their relation with customers, their relation with their sales force, etc. They go basically and get the best CRM that is in the market, deploy it, took 18 months, and it's a completely failure. Because again, has been technology driven and not technology enabled, which is where we make the distinction. So, related with this, when the framework that we created has the same components in common when we talk about disruption that when we talk about transformation. That is, first, we focus on the value proposition. That is what the customer is going to consume, what we're putting out there. And when we talk about value proposition, we're going to say, what is the experience? What is the experience that you're consuming? What are the product and services? And what is the monetization model that you're having? In other words, how you're creating value. And always building those components and that value proposition around a specific user, around a specific user persona, if you want to use that methodology, that has certain needs and has certain components that need to be fulfilled. And then we go to the next stack, that is what are the enablers that you need? You will need capabilities, you will need technology, you will need processes, you will need an organization, you will need data, AI. So those 5 components will become the key enablers for actually taking a value proposition and delivering to the market. But if you start the other way around, you start by saying, this is my technology, now let's define the process, now let's define the capabilities that I need. And then at the end say, well, what this is going to generate, you get kind of in a situation that you're cheap in technology that nobody cares. And I always kind of use the same analogy. That is imagine Excel. Probably if you have used Excel as myself, probably you were using, around 5 to 10% is the average features that a normal customer of Excel use. And that's those basic operations. But the technology there is extremely powerful. So if you focus on deploying a powerful technology that is only going to be used 5-10%, you're wasting resources, you're wasting capabilities. And when you apply this analogy to a large corporation, to a Fortune 500, means that you're deploying technology that will take 18, 24, 36 months to be deployed, to then actually have zero impact into the revenue, zero impact into the customer stickiness, zero impact into your employees.
So yeah, I think there's some big, I guess, cautions there that that bright shiny piece of technology is not going to solve your problem if you don't get the design of your process or the outcomes that you're looking to achieve correct.
Totally.
And I think that, like, one of the things that seems to be evolving is this, and disruption is good. Changing, I guess, the way that we approach things is good, and a lot of new companies have come up with solutions that do benefit us because they disrupted the way things have done. And we've talked about the taxi industry and Ubers and that kind of ride sharing process. But going back to what you've been talking about is that whole process of understanding that design of what the transformation needs to look like. It's a very similar blueprint for enabling disruption. Is that correct?
That would be correct. Like, the difference would be that, with disruption, we're trying to change something that exists in the market. We're going to be actually looking into what we said that are the rules that has not been written. Like in the example of Uber, independent of the country, all the taxis were operating more or less in the same way. So everyone was focusing on reducing the frictions. So when I said, well, there are not enough taxis, so, well, I will bring more taxis. When I said that, well, there is no transparency on the rates, we'll put kind of like a machine that is more complex, that we have rate for the morning, for the afternoon, for the night, for the airport, things like that. When I said that, well, there's no way to give feedback, we'll put an 800 number that you can call and you can complain. When we said that the taxis are dirty, they will issue a warning to the taxi drivers. So the market operates trying to reduce the frictions, not trying to remove the friction. When a disruptor comes in, basically he goes back to understanding the customer, understanding the needs. I want to move from A to B. I want to have full transparency of the rate that I'm going to pay. I want to have a say on the service level that I'm getting. I want to know how much time it's going to take to from A to B. And I want the car whenever I want it, not like by standing waiting for it. So then, if you start from those needs, from those kind of like components, and instead of trying to take the current value proposition and transform it and reduce the friction, you said how I can create something completely new that fixed it. And when we said we fixed, make it disappear. And so then you come up with something that will not exist in the market. It will come with something that will defy, what the players in the market are doing. This is why disruption is so difficult for a Fortune 500 or for a large company to do it. Because large companies operate in the market and they're successful. They have clients, they have great revenues, usually they're growing their clients, they're growing their revenues, and they're growing kind of like their net income or EBITDA. So why we're going to get into disruption? Well, when you go and ask your clients, 9 out of 10 will actually change their current kind of like value proposition or current companies if it was an easy way to do it. Your bank, your electric company, your water company, your insurance, etc., etc., etc. And when you go to B2B, it's exactly the same. So B2C, B2B, same stuff. But it's so difficult to change these components that people somehow decides to stay because there's no alternative. So I know that the bank is bad. I know that the insurance is bad. Until, a disruptor shows up and do something different. When you open that door and the customer experience that, is no way back. And, they would just move. So this is why, kind of like a small company, with 5 guys, with 10 guys, 20 guys, are able to craft something so well that basically create a disruption, because they're not starting from their legacy. They're not trying to maintain their legacy alive. They're not trying to actually justify, the roles, the jobs, etc. They're trying to solve genuinely a problem that exists in the market.
So there's a bit of a framework there that you just shared, and I think you go into that in a lot more detail in the book, which is a great source, and we'll encourage people. We'll share the links of where our listeners can purchase the book. I just want to touch on a couple of things, because you mentioned that the small, medium, or the small business is a lot better positioned to, I guess, input or create disruption in an existing field. There's 7 words which sort of, are the cause of death for any kind of transformation from business owners I've talked to, and those 7 words are: that's the way we've always done things. Do you feel that, or do you observe that the larger companies, like your listed companies, your companies with long histories of 50, 70 years, are reluctant to engage in transformation or more particularly disruption?
Totally. And I will add another one that is 4 words that we also heard a lot. It is not for us. Like, yes, kind of like I see the opportunity. Yes, I understand that the clients want it. Yes, I see the business case, but sorry, it's not for us. We don't do that stuff. And again, it goes to the firm nature of the human being. As human beings, we tend to stay where we're kind of like comfortable. If you're a company that has been growing, if you're a company that has a good position, and you're an executive of that company, you need to be a little bit crazy or a little bit special, or something needs to mobilize you to challenge the status quo. So we also tend to say that Raven is not for everyone. And it's not because, we want to reject customers. It's because we acknowledge that not every single company is ready to do disruption. Not every single company is ready to do transformation. But at the same time, we acknowledge that every single company in the planet needs transformation and probably will need disruption at some point. So it's this kind of like a double-edged sword that we experience with customers. And in that sense, I can share with you in confidence that we see 3 types of customers. Like the ones that basically are completely reluctant, and this is for them is a no, and they said basically your words or my words, but basically they don't want to engage into this conversation, and they prefer to leave this problem or this opportunity for the next executive. Then we have the ones that we call it the kind of like the illuminated ones, that are the ones that are kind of like proactively engaging in a conversation of transformation or disruption in a proactive manner before it's required. Sometimes, as we said, kind of like in Chile, like and in Latin America, like the bread is near the oven, kind of like the bread is surrounded there, so it might get burned if you don't do something. They start smelling that and they want to do something about it. And then the last case is the companies that has been disrupted, or disruption has arrived to their door and they need to react. This is the worst case scenario, because we see that in matters of months, they can lose, a big chunk of the revenue or the clients or their NPS or any key performance indicator that they are using. Now they're rushing and they're trying to basically compress, months or years of evolution into weeks or months, which is very complicated. There is a book that I like a lot, and I always kind of like mention it and recommend it to to my customers. That is called How They Might to Fall. And that basically talks about all these great companies that we knew about it: Motorola, Kodak, Blockbuster, Nokia, etc., BlackBerry, etc. And all of them have something in common. None of them actually were able to, react to the trends that they effectively identified. So all of them identified the trends that were going to happen. Like in the case of Kodak, it's an amazing case. Like the guys really developed the first kind of like digital photography, but they saw that as something that will undermine the main business. Therefore, they keep it kind of like on the side, like as a side project, something like that. They even developed kind of like, online storage. And I'm talking about the 90s. So it's like, very, very early stage. But again, they were unable to actually, kind of like detach from the business as usual to move to the next evolution. And in the completely opposite case, we have, Steve Jobs with the iPod. If you remember, the iPod was the most successful product that Apple has. And it was obliterated, in a matter of months after, they launched the iPhone. Because basically they put the same functionalities of music inside a completely new device. So they killed completely a category to actually create a new one.
Yeah, some amazing stories. And I think we look at some of those big stories and we think, well, that's the big guy in the town, but we really should also look at how we're working in our business and what's going to affect us. Look, you've spoken at a lot of venues, you've spoken in a lot of countries this year. Is there one thing particular, one insight that you've gained or seen that has really surprised you when people are talking about transformation and disruption?
I think people are starting to become more aware that time is of the essence. I think that most organizations are panicking with AI. But again, they're taking AI in the digitalisation form. So they want to have chatbots. They want to have kind of like agents. They want to use it for processes, things like that. There are very few companies that are thinking AI into a transformative component of the value proposition, or AI to actually enable or create new businesses or new disruptive opportunities. Very few companies are focusing there. 90-something% I can say that are still, saying, well, with AI, I will reduce, my call center, and I will have a better chances of answering right. And this is why, kind of like we decided again to write this book. If we go into the book and we elaborate a thesis that revolves around how important is design and how you can design these components to be successful. And actually, I added into the book, references and case studies from companies that we know, that we use on a daily basis, that effectively have transformed their value proposition using design. And at the end of the book, I kind of like share our methodology of transformation and disruption into the book. So the reader, independent if he works for a startup, a medium company, or a Fortune 500, can take that, methodology and apply it into, his or her real environment.
So you've developed really, I guess, a very practical guide frame or a guidebook on that whole process of transformation design. Congratulations, the book's already won a silver award. And I think, from our conversation today, we're encouraging our listeners to actually grab a copy of the book, and we'll put the links to where they can purchase that in the show notes and on the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website. Encourage them to take a look at that. Do you think, on that process, you mentioned how people are rushing to use AI, but thinking purely or mostly from a digitization point of view. Do you think perhaps we are thinking that because AI is here, we have to rush, but we need to step back and take a bigger picture, look at what we're actually trying to achieve?
Exactly. And this is what, our intent is with the book. Let people reflect and design a transformation process. And when we use the word design, it's not the cosmetic or aesthetic understanding of design. It's more about how you actually want to craft an interaction between people and components. In other words, how your value proposition is going to be crafted and created, and then how your enablers, that is the other component in the methodology, will be defined and will actually enable this value proposition. So at this point, I can say that this is proven. This is not a theory. In the book also we talk about the Industrial Revolution, how the ones that were successful were using design at that point to actually kind of like craft the changes. We talk about the dot-com boom in the 2000 and how the companies that were successful actually crafted design as their force. And actually we put down the hypothesis that then we prove with actual kind of like examples that the successful companies like Apple, IKEA, Disney, Walmart, etc., have used design to transform their value propositions. And when they have done it, they have been able to have a leapfrog in their strategy, in their revenues, in their engagement with clients, etc.
Yeah, so design is very important. If we were starting this process today, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to a business leader on how to embark on this transformation process?
I think the first one, and start from this, is like you need to understand your customer, even if it's B2C or B2B, and you need to understand the actual needs of that customer, which are not always as easy to identify. But once you have been able to identify the needs, you can immediately see the frustrations. When you see the frustrations, you can see immediately all the efforts that the industry have done to actually kind of reduce it, those components like reduce frictions or even sometimes introduce new frictions. And from that, you can design, either a transformation process or a disruption process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Some great advice. And I think, look, the next piece of advice would be to go and get the book and actually delve into this in a lot more detail. Follow the framework that JJ set out there, because just from listening to what we've been talking about already, we've been getting this wrong. There's a lot of cost if we get this wrong. Let's adopt a correct process and think about how we're actually going to implement correctly, think about our end user, think about our end goal, and do transformation correctly by designing the process. Or as JJ alluded to, is transformation the right method? Should we be instead considering disruption? But again, it starts with that design framework. JJ, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. We'll put the links to how our listeners can get in touch with Raven and yourself, and also where they can purchase a copy of the book Transformation Design, which we encourage them to do because there's a lot of great value in there, as you've heard from listening to JJ speaking to us today. JJ, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for sharing your experience with business leaders and business owners worldwide.
Thanks to you, Paul. Pleasure being here. And just one last piece, I would not like to say advice, but I would like to say that's a prompt to everyone. Let's there is nothing to be afraid of, embracing into transformation or disruption in reality. What you need to be really afraid is like if you don't do anything and you wait for someone else to actually do it.
That's fantastic advice to finish with. Thank you again, JJ.